Hey guys, it's Maggie Mylow here, and I'm back with another lesson for my virtual art club. So if you're just joining in, this is I think the fifth or sixth video. We're just doing a basic introduction this week into what each thing is and what you need. So there's a supply video. We talk about canvases in another video, and then what's the other thing we talk about? We talk about gesso and brushes. Oh, sorry. Brushes was the other thing. So today we're going to talk about paint. But before I get started, I just wanted to say that if you are looking for help on any of the stuff that we talk about in this class, or you are looking for a little bit more hands-on experience or a little bit of a group effort, there's going to be more challenges coming up, etc. So I have a virtual art club Facebook group. So it's Maggie Mylow Virtual Art Club is the name of the Facebook group, and you can search it, and it's open to anybody. Anybody who wants to learn and wants to share. No spam, please. It is just specifically for learning and sharing. So right now, currently we have 39 members since I started this on Sunday. So thank you to all of you who are joining in. I really appreciate it. I designed this kind of as a platform for students, because I know that there's going to be a lot of funding cuts coming up with schooling, and usually arts are the first thing that gets cut. So this is my hope, to offer this to kids so that they still have the opportunity to learn. Pardon me. So I'm doing these free classes, but I am hoping that people will appreciate the value that they are, and I would appreciate any donations in any denomination. And in order to do that, if you would like to just contact me at maggiemylow@hotmail.com, and then we can make further arrangements from there. And I would really appreciate anything. This money that will come in will be using to buy other supplies, etc. So that way I can continue teaching this class. So just thank you again for all of you who joined. And so now we're just going to get into talking about acrylic paint. We're not going to talk about anything else today. We're just going to talk about the acrylic paint. So to understand what acrylic paint is, it is a polymer or plasticky kind of paint. So this is a paint skin. So what a paint skin is if you have some paint that's just dried on this little plastic plate and you just peeled it off, they call that a paint skin. And so this is what it looks like. And you can see it's really stretchy. It's very plasticky. So that's the polymer and pigment powder basically in there. So some of the properties of acrylic paint that I really like are that they are inexpensive and easy to find. They dry really fast, and if you want them to dry a little bit faster, all you have to do is just get a blow dryer and you can just kind of speed up the drying time. They're easy to clean, so they are kind of a water base, or they clean up with soap and water, so it's easy to clean them up. They're waterproof when dry, so just going to show you here, like if I sprayed some water on here and I just kind of dripped it off, you can see it's waterproof, so the water won't make the pigments reactivate or anything like that, like watercolor. So it's kind of nice that you can really make sure that once it's dry, it's going to be preserved. So then that also means when it's waterproof, when it's dry, we can layer more acrylic paint over top of it. So it's easy to do touch-ups and layers. So just to show you here, I've got some more yellow paint here. You can see I started adding some layers of yellow paint. So I'm just going to pick up a little bit more. You can see I can even layer some more yellow right over top of this, and it's going to start turning that black color underneath, and it's going to make it go away. So you can layer either over top, or if you had a mistake, you could cover it up easily. It's really hard to get out of fabric. That's my only negative on the acrylic paint. So it does clean up with soap and water. So if you can find the paint on your clothes really quickly and get to it really quick, you're safe. But if it's been dried on, it's a little bit harder to get out. I've ruined a lot of clothes that way. There is something called Kiss Off, and you can buy it at art stores. It's really hard to find, but I've used it to get paint out of carpet and clothes, and it works really well. So if you have a really nice clothes that got some paint on it, you might want to check that out. It will save your clothes. So it is permanent when it dries. So if you wanted to take a painting like this, and even if you didn't seal it properly and you hung it up on the wall, it's still going to be protected and it's still going to be okay for quite a few years. So we do want to seal paintings. We'll get into that later on, but it's perfectly okay for temporary purposes to leave it without protection. Okay. So then we are going to talk about bodies or thicknesses of paint. So the reason why we're going to talk about this a little bit is because there is a different consistency for different kinds of paint, but there is a really good medium kind of that I want you to get to. So it's really the thickness of paint that I kind of look for when I'm painting. So we're going to talk about high flow. So there's a high flow. Then there is a soft body paint. So it's a little bit different. And then it comes in a couple different brands. So this is a soft body as well. This is another different color in a soft body. And then we have a fluid acrylic. And then we also have a heavy body. So we're going to kind of get into the first one here. So let's just get into the fluid acrylic. So it's just, you can hear it's got a little mixing ball in there. It's quite runny. I already had this out, but I just want to kind of show you how it dries too. So I'm just going to take some more of this paint and you're going to see like it can run. It's really runny. Oop, see, not in focus. There we go. So it's really runny. It's kind of like just drips and runs, which is really fun for depending on what kind of effect you're looking for. So basically this is any kind of paint with a lot of that polymer binder in it to make it super runny. So that's what that is. Then the next thickness we get into is the fluid acrylic. And so this guy here, he's the next thickness up. So I just had to get some gunkies off there. So this is the next thickness. This is a really pretty color. So you're going to see it's the next kind of like creamiest color. This one's kind of pretty watery. This one's kind of more creamy. I'm just gonna pick it up for a second. You're gonna see it can run and it holds a little bit of peaks. You're gonna notice the fluid acrylic, it doesn't really hold any peaks at all. It dries pretty flat. And then the soft body, the fluid acrylic, it kind of has a little bit of form to it. This is the consistency that I like to paint in. So that is kind of my favorite kind of paint to buy. This is typically the thickness that craft paint will come in as well. And you usually don't have to add a lot of water to it. So that's an important note as well. So the next thickness we have is a soft body. So this is a little bit of a thicker paint. These are a couple brands. So this is Liquitex Basics. There's also Acrylic Galleria paint by Winsor & Newton. So those are a couple really good brands. And I'm just going to put this one out and you're going to see that it's a little bit more like a yogurt consistency. So I'm just going to put it right beside the other one. So you can see how it dries. So you see even this one, it dries a little bit bumpier than this one. So it's got a little bit more of a ridge to it. It levels out a little bit more. This is still a little bit wet, but it'll level out a little bit more. But you can see that it's gonna hold a little bit of a peak to it. And then the last one that we will talk about is a heavy body. And this guy is really thick. He's very much like a sour cream consistency. He's like really thick. He's not gonna fall off that palette knife. And he's gonna hold a lot of ridges. So I'm just gonna put that right beside there just so you can kind of see the difference between how it's drying. And based on how thick they are is how fast they will dry. So the thicker the paint, the longer it will take to dry. The thinner the paint, the quicker it dries. So you can even see here that even here where it has dried, there is a little bit of ridges to it. And so it will hold some form. So I just did a little bit of a chart here. And what I did, just so if you wanted to follow along in the same way, if you did have any of these at home, you could, and if not, you can just wait until you get them. If you had one of these, you can even just kind of put it in as you find it. So I put the high flow fluid, soft body, and heavy body, and I just did a little bit of swipe of each one, and I wanted to leave some ridges so that way you could see a little bit of how it would dry. Okay, so then the next thing we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the grade of paint, because depending on what you can find available to you will be dependent on the grade of paint that might be available. So the first thing we're going to talk about is craft paint. There's, Apple Barrel. I think there's Folk Art. I think Artist Loft is another one. And they're relatively cheap. They're, anywhere from $1 to $5. But they have a lot of filler in them. So if you've ever taken a lot of water to any of these craft paints and you see it kind of like crackle or separate, that just shows you that it has a lot of binder in it. It's a really cheap binder too. So it usually has a lot of colors, but they're usually on more of a matte finish. You can get some glossy finish ones, but you can really tell that the quality and coloring is a little bit different. If you've played with craft paint to professional paint, you can really tell the difference. So they aren't really archival safe. They don't have a long longevity of life. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're looking at projects that you're doing. So student grade paint is the next step up. So we are getting into, there's the Dollar Rounding Graduate. You can find these at art stores, not really readily available at Michael's. This is another one available at an art store. It's just called Acrylic. It's kind of like almost like a no-name one. And then this one is kind of really available anywhere. Liquitex acrylic paint. There's like Artist Loft and Michael's. I think even you can find kind of like step up paint even in the dollar store. So just kind of like look for a little bit of a student grade or middle of the brand paint. They usually have a little fewer colors than the craft paint, but they have less filler in them. So you can usually add a little bit more water. They're a little bit more forgiving. And so they range anywhere from $5 to about 15-ish bucks. And then we get into the professional paint. It's going to be a lot more expensive, but in long term, you're kind of using less paint because it is so pigmented that you do find that it does pull the color a lot farther, if that makes sense. So the colors that, or the brands that I have are Golden. These are kind of my favorite brand, and these are the ones that I kind of like. They have the most range of different styles of the bodies of paint. So these guys for professional, these guys are going to be really pigmented, a lot more money, but the colors are going to be truer. They have a longer light fastness to it, so they are going to be light fast for 100 years. And I know it sounds like they're going to cost more and it's going to cost you more money, but really in the end you do end up using a lot less. And they do range from about $15 and up, and it depends on the brand. And I'm not going to get into prices and why prices are different and such like that right now, maybe farther on down the road, but it's not really a lesson for right now. So then my recommendation, we're gonna go from very inexpensive and readily available is Liquitex. So this is gonna be kind of available at Michael's and Walmart. Another brand that I have seen at Michael's and Walmart and stuff like that is the Windsor Acrylic, Gallery Acrylic. And then if you're going to the professional end, my recommendation would be the golden acrylics in any form that you like, just in the consistency that you want to paint in. That's what I would tell you. Okay, so then we are going to talk about the basic concept of acrylic painting. So we're just going to talk about this in this part, and we're going to get into it later on when we get into talking about layering, which will be in the next lesson. So we're going to say that basically how you want to paint is you want to take a base coat, then you want to adjust your colors and your shadows on top of that, and then you want to add highlights. So if I was to do, I don't know, I'm just going to do, white is not a true highlight, so we'll just put this white out. But if I wanted to highlight or layer, so if this was my base coat, I would adjust my coloring. So if I wanted to just shift a color, I don't know, let's make this line a little bit lighter. Let's just add this light line on top here. So, I mean, this is just kind of a rough explanation, but you could see how I could put this color on top, or as my base coat. I could put another color over top of it, and then I could add a highlight on top of it. So you basically are doing it in steps. So that's why we are going to do things the way we're going to do it. And it's going to give us a little bit extra depth instead of having things too flat. So we'll get into that into another lesson. So we are going to go into an exercise, which I'm going to do in a part 2. So this is kind of what we're going to be working on next. And that is we are going to learn to work from back to front. So this will actually be a painting exercise that you'll be doing in your book. So before you want to move on into the next lesson, I would suggest you, if you have either gesso or white paint, do 2 coats of white paint. So do 1 coat of white paint or gesso, let it dry, then do another coat of white paint or gesso and let it dry. And then we are going to do an exercise right in our book. And yes, it's totally safe. So if you want to join me in part 2, we'll do that into the next step. All right, see you soon.